DevilNeverCry.
Took me quite a while to actually get all of this sorted, believe it or not, in regards to this entire layout. But as you can see, I've got all of the icons, I should probably not use icons, all of the symbols and what they're called underneath them, so that they're easy to see. And we're going to rank them, with S being the best here. I don't know why S is considered better than A. It sounds cool, so we're gonna go for it. And then yeah, I mean D is what? Dismal, crazy, badass, awesome, saucy. I guess we can go for that. Let me move that out of the way real quick. Okay, so we're just gonna do this at random. We're not going to start with any particular skill. We might. Let's just start from the top left. We always start with the top left, right? So, before I click on the wrong thing. So this one right here is what we're going to start with. We're going to start with Will-O-Wisp. So, Will-O-Wisp, I don't think it needs to be said, is S tier. Primarily, and you'll find this out if you ever try out Ultimaniac mode, just due to the fact that it can stop you from being one-shot, and also passively attacks and inflicts damage to enemies, much like, for example, Virgil's Spiral Swords from DevilNeverCry. It's a fantastic skill. It's not one that I ever used during my initial playthrough, and not really much towards Final Fantasy mode, but is one that I got to know quite intimately in Ultimaniac mode. So for that reason alone, it's going to be in the S rank. And then we move on, and we're going to start with Ignition. So, Ignition is, again, it's a skill I never really used all too much. This is the skill in which Clive engulfs himself in flame and ends up kind of just like floating across the battlefield, much like a battering ram, just absolutely decimating everything that he, in this motion here, everything that he touches. And so, it's cool. But it's not one that I've used all too much, if I'm honest. So we're gonna start and leave this one in the middle of the road, and it's funny. If I wanted to be really, if I wanted to do what a lot of people do, if I was more savvy when it comes to content creation, I should have put all of the bad ones in the good tier and all the good ones in the bad tier, and watch people just pop off and explode. Okay, so I mean that's pretty much most of Ifrit's abilities ranked. So next we'll move on to, I guess, Odin and Odin's loadout, and we're gonna start, I think, with the old Zan. So I've included the iconic feats as well as the iconic abilities, primarily because they are all iconic. It would be remiss of me to not include them in a tier list. So. Technically, the skill in the game is called Arm of Darkness. Everyone knows it as Zantetsuken. And I don't think it needs to be said. This is also S tier. If we want to be anal about it, we can whack that. That Zan is incredibly useful, and for reasons that pretty much don't need to be explained. It does an incredible amount of damage. It's fairly easy to build up, particularly to a level 5. And it looks cool, it's the Judgment Cut, There's a lot of references to DMC, and there's going to be a lot in this tier list. But yeah, it's a Judgment Cut, and Judgment Cuts make your judgment nut, and so for that reason it's going to be S tier. Next we move on to Rift Slip, when you want to slip it. Rift Slip is the move that you can use to basically cancel out of the recovery of the majority of your moves, and is great for setting up skills into skills into skills. Yeah, whenever you want to slip it into the rift, as Chad is saying. Very god tier, yeah. Random hair. It's fantastic. It's the gods trying to smite me, you see. So, yeah, I mean, this slows down time whenever you use it effectively in a combo. It can help you get out of stun lock. It's just a great skill overall, and I think what we'll do is we'll just We'll just stack them. I do think it's probably not as useful as Will-O-Wisp, but it is very useful. And even if you don't want to go for the usefulness in a standard combat scenario, if you're doing things like combos and stuff, it has to be S tier, you know. Now, Heaven's Cloud is the move in which you get, again, Virgil's Rapid Slash, where Clive goes from enemy to enemy to enemy, and you know, he slaps the absolute soul and life out of him. So Heaven's Cloud is, you know, is somewhat skill based in that you have to time your button presses for whenever Clive actually gets to that enemy, and so for that aspect, you can't necessarily mash, otherwise you'll fail. I think this is going to be somewhat of a solid A tier for the time being, and we'll leave it there and we'll go from there. With some of these, I'll come back at the end of everything, and I may make a few adjustments here and there. But, well, yeah. Tentatively in A for the time being. Is Will-O-Wisp that good? Oh, yeah. Ultimaniac mode, it literally is a lifesaver, you know? It absorbs so much damage. It's crazy. Then we move on to Gungnir. So Gungnir is that skill in which Clive transforms the Arm of Darkness into Gungnir, the Spear of Odin, and he twirls it around. You know, anybody ever seen that weird nunchuck video on YouTube where the guy does a backflip and then face plants the ground? It's kind of like that, except there's no face plant. Again, this is this move looks really, really cool from an aesthetic perspective. You know, like him just like matrixing that shit. But it doesn't build all too much Zan, and it does fuck all, you know, for damage, which is the part for most of Odin's moves, I'm wondering if I should. I mean, we're gonna leave this in A tier. This might be between A and B for the time being. I know I've essentially like mixed things up here, right? Who would have thought I could put a skill in between two categories? You know, it's just the mind games. But for the time being, yeah, we'll leave that there. Tentative between A and B. And then the last of Odin's skills is going to be Dancing Steel, not to be confused with Dancing Mad. Dancing Steel is the move that has the incredibly long startup time, but essentially just as long as you get that initial hit off, it goes into its full combo, allowing you to get, provided the enemy doesn't die, guaranteed Zan build-up. I do think that this one's probably an A for the time being, because it's guaranteed Zan build-up, and provided you get the setup for the Dancing Steel in regards to that startup animation just right, so that enemies don't move, it'll be fine, you know. And as I said in one of my previous videos, if you've got the Pull of Darkness accessory, which boosts your Zan build-up by 50%, one Dancing Steel is all it takes to get to a level 5 Zan, basically. And for that reason, it's good. It's good. Right. Well, then we're going to move on to... Let's move on to Garuda next. So, Deadly Embrace is the iconic feat that allows Clive to pull enemies towards him, much like Nero's Devil Bringer. It will throw him up into the air if the enemy is too heavy to be pulled. Also similar to the Devil Bringer, but kind of different in the way that it throws you up. But more importantly, you can use it to use Deadly Takedown, where you're able to stun bosses and mini-bosses for an extended period of time, provided you get their stagger bar to the halfway point. And I think for that alone, like, the utility of this move is crazy. It's like crazy good. It has to be. And for that reason alone, it's going to be S tier. For that reason alone. The upgraded Will-O-Wisp is pretty good for mitigation and stagger build. That is also true. I primarily use it for the damage mitigation. But yeah, it's great for building stagger. That's why it's at that S tier. Now, we're gonna move that one over there. We're gonna move this one over here, I think. Because Rift Slip is good, but it's not that good, you know. Okay, Then we have Aerial Blast. Now, Aerial Blast is not a move that I've used, unfortunately, all too much. It does a really good amount of stagger damage. That much I remember, but I pretty much sacked it off, mainly for I think Flames of Rebirth and even Judgment Bolt, because those are the first 3 icons you get access to. Aerial Blast, I think, and feel free to disagree, is something that I'm gonna whack. I'm gonna leave it here. I think I'm gonna leave that there between A and B, and perhaps go from there. It might be something that I think about once more. Narrow Snatch, never took it off. Yeah, it is fantastic, right? Works very nicely with the Rebirth. Flames of Rebirth. I like a lot of these skills. They have a lot of synchronization between a lot of synergy between these skills that works quite well. Then we have Wicked Wheel. And Wicked Wheel is the move in which Clive spins concentrically and lifts up enemies in a 360-degree field around him up into the air. This move is baller. It's A rank. For the fact that you can style on enemies. For people that don't necessarily know how to lift enemies, aside from all the other tools that you have, maybe they might like also this skill as well. I think for that reason alone, I think we're gonna leave that. Maybe we'll leave that here. I think, because I'm trying to keep in mind all the other skills that come alongside it as well. Actually, no. We're gonna leave that. We're gonna leave that at A, and we're gonna take Gouge. And I think Gouge, the ability where Clive basically channels his inner JoJo's Bizarre Adventures and just goes to town on the. Well, actually, no. That's probably Titan's skill. Let's just say he gouges people out to pieces with his skill, and this is great for building stagger, primarily when it's upgraded. And it's very great in the early game. But after that early game, I kind of didn't really use it, unfortunately. I mean, it's cool for combos and stuff, but I think that for me, there's more skills that kind of outclass it, and I think for that reason, it's probably going to be. Yeah, we'll leave that. We'll leave Gouge. We'll leave Gouge there. I think we'll do that. Yeah, so we're not double teaming now. I'm wondering if that's... Yeah, that'll be cool. That makes sense. And then last but not least, out of Garuda's toolkit, we've got Rook's Gambit. Rook's Gambit, I think, again, is great. I should probably explain how it works. So Rook's Gambit is the ability in which you're able to counter moves, physical attacks that come towards Clive's way. You have to basically use the ability during the hop back step that Clive has during the Rook's Gambit animation. And if done correctly with good timing, Clive will retort with his own attack, which does a decent amount of stagger damage, I believe. Not crazy amounts, but an okay amount. My only issue with Rook's Gambit is that, depending on what attack you're using this to dodge, even if you upgrade it, the reprisal attack, the one that you get after good timing, can still miss. So it's not guaranteed that you'll get the stagger, the move that does good stagger. And for that alone, we're gonna we're probably gonna leave that there. I think we'll probably leave that there at a solid between A and B. Blinds you from the enemy. That's what you didn't like. Yeah, it can. The language, the visual language, sometimes can be quite intense. And you're right, Dan. Gouge does shred stagger. The issue here is that a lot of these moves are just so good. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to in a bit of a not a heel turn, maybe a face turn, whatever the term is. Let's start on Ramuh. We're going to start with Blind Justice, and unfortunately for me, this is going to be the first C tier. Unfortunately, so Blind Justice is very akin to Kingdom Hearts' shotlock system. You're able to target enemies. Clive throws out lightning based on how many times you've targeted an enemy, and you kind of go from there. My issue with Blind Justice is the fact that you're entirely vulnerable whenever you use it. It doesn't necessarily do a lot of damage. It's cool for things like setting up combos and having enemies float. But in all honesty, when you compare it to every other iconic feat out there, it really is not that good. It doesn't have the utility of things like Phoenix Shift or Deadly Embrace or Cold Snap or even Wings of Light, you know? And so I think for that reason alone, it's gonna be here in the LC tier. You know, it's got to be. On the other hand, though, alternatively, we do have Judgment Bolt. Judgment Bolt is obviously Ramuh's ultimate ability. It's the one where he throws out a big bolt 11, 11 being lightning, for those who don't know. Old-timey term for lightning, 11. I'm not sure if they still use that term. It does great damage to whoever you're targeting, but the collateral damage it does to enemies surrounding that target is basically almost negligible. So it's pretty much only worth using against a singular target, like a boss or a mini-boss. And I think it does a decent amount of, it does a balanced amount of physical damage and stagger damage. And so for that reason alone, I think it's probably worth putting in the A rank. Yeah. And then we have Thunderstorm. And if you're not aware of how the majority of Ramuh's abilities work, basically, or the main sort of driving factor behind them is that whenever you typically hit one of these enemies with a skill from Ramuh, they'll have an extended recovery animation, so they'll fall to the ground and they'll lay there basically for an extended period of time before they then get back up. That's the key catch between all of them. And in terms of, like, you know, the 11 has paralyzed them, so to speak. Thunderstorm, whilst it's got the cool twirling animation at the very beginning, and, you know, Clive does throw down a couple of bolts of lightning on an enemy. For me, it's probably going to be a solid B tier move. You know? That's just personally how I see it. I wonder if I can get that underneath here. Yeah. It's cool. Doesn't necessarily do all too much damage or stagger damage. It does have enemies and it leaves them stunned, but it's not amazing, you know? It's not amazing. It's just cool. It's okay. It's serviceable, you know? Then we have the big baller shot caller lightning rod, which should come as no surprise, is an S tier. You know, I don't think anybody was going to deny that. Now, where is this going to go? You know, I do think maybe this will go over here. Maybe we'll have that like that, kind of. Lightning Rod basically amplifies any ability that you do in regards to their physical damage and the stagger damage. You can also trick enemies into hitting the Lightning Rod themselves to basically do big fuck off stagger damage. With the bigger the attack they do that hits the Lightning Rod, the greater the stagger damage they incur. It's great. Yeah, it's one of the most broken skills that Clive has in his arsenal. You know, I don't think anybody's gonna disagree. Then we have Pile Drive. And Pile Drive is the big move where Clive slams Ramuh's stake into the ground. Big AoE Air of Effect attack that throws enemies back. I really like Pile Drive because it does a really good amount of stagger damage. And if you can hit multiple enemies at once, which you're likely going to, if you just use it in the midst of a bunch of enemies, it throws them back and it builds a really good amount of limit break from what I remember. So for that alone, I think it's secured its place, for me at least, in A rank. And it also still has the added effect of paralyzing enemies somewhat and having them essentially lie on the ground, feeling absolutely defeated, you know? Absolutely slumped after what's happened to them. Oh. So yeah, I think I might move that just over there, yeah. I believe. And we'll kind of go from there. Okay. So now that's somewhat halfway. I mean, I don't think there's anything I want to move for the time being. I might space these out just a little bit, I think, so that visually they're easier to read. That might make sense. Okay. Right. Let's move on to Phoenix. So Phoenix, and we're going to start with the Phoenix Shift, which is obviously, it's the first iconic ability that you start out with, and, well, iconic feat, sorry, and it's the teleport that Clive has, right? You can, it's like a trick up almost from DevilNeverCry, or a trick 2, or an air trick down. There's so many tricks. The main issue I have with this ability and this teleport is that you're vulnerable throughout the entirety of that animation. So whilst you're teleporting, you're vulnerable. So if you teleport and an attack comes across your path midway, you'll get slapped out of your teleport and you'll take damage. So for that alone, it's useful, particularly if you want to chase up enemies you've just launched. But it's not amazing. It's not amazing, you know. I think we'll leave Phoenix Shift probably there, I think, between A and S. Because it's great, but it's not that great. Next we have Scarlet Cyclone. And for me, Scarlet Cyclone is pretty much a B tier. This is a standard quick area of effect. Clive sweeps himself 360 degrees in a bath of flames, in a wall of flames, so to speak. Does decent damage. Again, it's one of the first abilities you have access to. Does decent damage. Gets enemies kind of away from you. But it's not amazing, you know? At least I found, compared to some of the other skills. This is hard. Phoenix slaps. As hard as is it as hard as a Deadly Embrace? See, my thing with Deadly Embrace compared to Phoenix Shift is that one of them allows you to pull enemies towards yourself and also get out of an enemy's way by throwing yourself up in the air, and also stun enemies for longer. And one of them is just simply a teleport. You know what I mean? And as much as I like the teleport, the fact that you're vulnerable throughout it kind of kills it for me. Kills the utility. So for me, I don't think it's as useful as Deadly Embrace, but it's still cool. Much better than Blind Justice. Then we have Heat Wave, and I think Heat Wave for me has to be. Does it have to be? I think Heat Wave is... See, I'm uncertain. I think we'll leave Heat Wave in an S rank. So Heat Wave is a move that allows Clive to throw out... Anybody seen any Bleach, you know? Some Getsuga Tenshos? Throw out a shockwave of fire from his sword. But most importantly, if you time it right with a projectile that comes your way, you're able to block that projectile and throw out, when you've upgraded it, several other shockwaves. And this move is great for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that it's a projectile attack. It's one of the only kind of... It's one of the earliest projectiles you have access to, so to speak. And it does a really, really good amount of stagger damage, like a considerable amount. There is a bit of a risk tied to it, of course, in that you have to get your timing right. But I think for that reason alone, the fact that it's very like skill-based and how it works, I think it's an S rank. An S rank for me. A move I used quite a lot in the game. Then we have Flames of Rebirth. And Flames of Rebirth, or Flames of Rebirth for me, compared to all of the abilities, I should probably mention what it does. It does a big area of effect attack around Clive. It also heals him slightly. And it continuously it does multiple hits. Compared to all of the other ultimate abilities, like Diamond Dust, like, I guess, Dancing Steel, like Aerial Blast, I mean, it's probably on the same track for me as Aerial Blast. It's okay, early game, but it soon gets outclassed by a lot of the other abilities that you have access to, you know? And then last but not least, we have Rising Flame, which, as the name implies, Clive has a jet of flame that spurts, what a horrible word, from the ground, launches enemies that are light enough, does a good chunk of damage early game as well, when you've staggered, particularly like bosses and whatnot. But again, kind of just eventually gets almost outclassed later on. So I think for me, it's probably going to be... No, it's probably going to be a B. Yeah, it's a solid B. I'll move these along somewhat. It's a solid B. Then, I guess it's perhaps time that we move on to something else. Now, do I want to slightly adjust this, or is this going to be decent enough? Is this something I feel like I want to adjust? I think I'm going to probably move gouge down, most likely. I think, yeah. I'll leave that there. Let's tidy this up slightly. I might move Thunderstorm down, and we'll probably move Gungnir down, actually. I think that might be something I'm more happy with, yeah. Now that I've got a lot of other pieces on the board, so to speak. Okay. That doesn't seem too bad. Yeah, okay, I'm pleased with that. Ignition. No, we'll leave ignition. Ignition's cool. Okay, so still so many. There's still so many, right? I know we've still got a lot more to get through here. Okay, so moving on to Shiva. Cold Snap. Come on, you know, Cold Snap. You know what I mean? It freeze your dick off. What? Cold Snap has a lot of utility. Permafrost alone makes it an S tier. The fact that you can use Frostbite to freeze enemies almost very temporarily, of course, is an added bonus. There is a bit of a risk behind it in that you have to get that precision dodge timing, which isn't super hard. It'll kill you in Ultimaniac if you're not careful, but that's where Will-O-Wisp comes into play, if you know what I mean. It's an S tier. Cold Snap has to be an S tier. This is a mainstay throughout, as soon as I got it, throughout the rest of that initial playthrough, all of New Game Plus, and well into Ultimaniac mode for me. Diamond Dust. I mean, Diamond Dust is a classic ability, you know? Diamond Dust, Shiva, you know what I mean? Impeccable. So Diamond Dust is a big area of effect. If you upgrade it, it hits twice. It does a considerable amount of stagger damage. I believe if you look at the menu in-game, the stagger rating is 5 stars. It's maxed out. You know, and again, if you pair this with Lightning Rod, if you use it in between a lot of enemies, or even just next to like 1 or 2 enemies, it'll give you a big hefty bonus to your limit break bar. Some of you might have seen in some of my previous streams, like it does a lot. It does a lot of heavy lifting, and that's obviously without saying the amount of damage it does to an enemy's stagger bar. It's impeccable. You know, it's impeccable. I might have to move these back, like I said, yeah. Actually, don't know why I spaced them out like that. I'm an idiot. Now, okay, I'm probably going to move you over there. Heatwave. Yeah, I'm rethinking Heatwave. Heatwave should probably stay there. Diamond Dust. And no, Rift Flip. You're gonna stay down compared to everything else. I think you're gonna stay down. Yeah. Okay. Now we've got a few others. So Ice Age is okay. So Ice Age is the chargeable move that Shiva has, in which she charges up. They charge up a She device that streaks across the ground, spikes up. You know, Toshiro style from Bleach. And if you get it just right, I believe you can also freeze the enemy right at the very end. It's a cool move. It does a decent amount of damage. But there's nothing special about it. You know, it's okay. It's an okay move. It's not too bad. I think better than Rising Flame for me, but it's okay, you know. Rhyme is the move in which basically Shiva throws out a giant spinning snowflake that twirls, does damage to anybody who goes near it, has almost a bit of a vacuum effect in which if something touches it, an enemy that's small, it'll kind of also get sucked in as it spins, that allows it to continuously get attacked. And it's repositionable. But it's not that great. It's not something I found myself using a lot, unfortunately. You know? Like, enemies in this game move so much that it's a bit of a hassle to throw this out and then have to continuously move it again and again and again. Especially if it's not like Lightning Rod, which has a lot of utility. This is just like a, you know... And it... Yeah. I mean, I guess if you want to throw it out and do passive damage, sure. But with the way that I play, in terms of, like... always trying to be aggressive and trying to just, like... you know, slap things down. It's okay. Mesmerize is the ability in which Clive throws out, I believe initially 3, but when you've upgraded it 6, different shards of ice that basically explode and throw whatever enemies they touch, if they're light enough, towards Clive, which will allow you to continue on with your continuous assault of, you know, your barrage of melee attacks, of skills, of whatever it is that you want to use. And for that reason, it's cool. Combo wise, it's got some great potential. But again, in the main game, it's, you know, when you've got things like Deadly Embrace to just pull enemies towards you, I really did not find myself using it at all. I think I found it more useful in Rhyme, to be honest. So we'll bring Rhyme down, maybe. Or bring Mesmerize up. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of just like, you know what I mean? You know? And Rhyme plus Lightning Rod. I mean, yeah, like if that's your particular setup, if you want to use Lime and Lightning Rod, yeah. Rhyme and Lightning Rod together, I think that might work. You know, I think that'd probably be pretty good because, as we know, Lightning Rod works really well with a lot of abilities that hit multiple times. But for me, I just didn't find much use. But the cool thing is, and this is something that you can see just looking at this chart, with the development of this game, the developers stated that they left the combat design open-ended in that there was no right or wrong answer in regards to your playstyle, which is why a lot of these are just so viable. You know, like a lot of these, you know, depending on the person, can probably move up or down a position, but they're all relatively quite well, save for Blind Justice, which I still think is just, yeah, it's really not great. You know, it's cool. Let's move on to Bahamut, the King of Dragons, next. So, first we start off with Mega Flare. And Mega Flare for me is a little bit divisive in that it's like, and this is something, Mega Flare is pretty much something that I rarely ever touched in the main game or in Final Fantasy mode and New Game Plus, but I used quite a lot in Ultimaniac, primarily because it's a very defensive skill. And I think my biggest issue with it is the fact that if you take damage, not only are you thrown out of the ability, which is fine, you know, that's cool, and that should work, but that Mega Flare bar starts to drop incredibly fast, you know, or Wings of Light as it's called. It starts to drop incredibly fast, which means that you really have to commit to using it. And again, it's just kind of at odds with how I like to just like overwhelm and decimate, you know, with my playstyle. That is when we're not on Ultimaniac, in which I'm the one that ends up getting just thoroughly just slapped to pieces. But Mega Flare level 4 is pretty cool. And the Mega Flare dodges is alright. For me, it's probably going to be a solid A tier, you know? Like, it's great. You know, it's better. I mean, everything's better than Blind Justice. Let's be honest. But it's not amazing. You know, it's not amazing. So for that reason alone, we'll leave Mega Flare there. On the other hand, though, Giga Flare is. I mean, you know, we're out here Kamehamehaing people. You know what I mean? You know, for that reason alone. You know, for anybody that grew up on Dragon Ball, it has to be an S tier. But in all seriousness, I believe Giga Flare does the most physical damage out of all of the attacks you have. At least that's what the menu implies with its 5 stars of damage. It's a movable attack. Like all of the other ultimate abilities, it slows down time, makes you impervious to any attacks coming your way, like fully full of invincible iframes. But it, because of the fact that it hits multiple times, it works well with Lightning Rod, and it can penetrate. Yes, I said the word, penetrate. Multiple enemies at once. So if you line them up and take them to the penetration station, you can absolutely decimate. And for that reason alone, it has to be an S tier. A complete mainstay in my loadout from the moment I got it, regardless of whatever mode I was playing. Then we have Flare Breath. And Flare Breath, when you've got Giga Flare, Flare Breath is not a move that I used really kind of at all, unfortunately. Like, I really did not use Flare Breath. Like, it's basically a move in which, Clive, for those of you that don't know, Clive throws out a jet of azure flames from his hands, allowing you to move around, almost similar to Giga Flare, but it doesn't penetrate a lot of enemies, doesn't go very far. It's an alright move. It's cool, but I just didn't get much use out of it, so it's going to be a solid B tier. A solid B tier. I'm looking at it. Ignition can probably. Yeah, we'll do that. Ignition can stay there. I got more use out of Flare Breath than Ignition, to be honest. And then we have 2 more of Bahamut's abilities. We've got Satellite. We've got Impulse. So we'll start with Satellite. Satellite is basically a move in which Clive throws out, depending, I believe, on how often what it's upgraded to, throws out 2 floating orbs of magic, in which every time you press that magic button, whether you're charging magic, using standard magic, using magic and magic burst combos, whether you've been thrown, like you've been hit with an attack and you've been thrown out and you mash that attack button, these 2 floating orbs will throw out bursts of their own magic to supplement whatever it is that you're doing. And it's a cool skill. They don't really do all too much damage. They will build up over time, though, obviously through attrition, because you're continuously using them. They're cool. If you don't use magic at all in your build, it's a fucking worthless skill, let's be honest. But for me, I think they were okay. It wasn't too bad, Just thinking about where and how far I want this to go, though. Where would I place this? I think for me, Satellite might be a solid. We'll leave it as a no. I think what we'll do, in comparison to everything else, it's probably going to be an A tier. Impulse, on the other hand, is going to be a B tier. So Impulse is an ability in which Clive throws out these orbs of light that will spin concentrically around whatever you're locked onto, and they'll spin faster and faster, and they'll attack the enemy basically autonomously. Now, the longer they attack the enemy, the more charge that they get, if that makes sense. So they'll change color. They'll change colors twice, with the first level or initial color, first level of charge, second level of charge. And whenever they charge up, I think they spin slightly faster and do slightly more damage. But the cool thing about Impulse is that once they've fully charged, I believe if you press the button again, you can actually get them to explode prematurely. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, I'd never know anything about exploding prematurely. What are you talking about? What are we talking about? But it's a cool move. Unfortunately, it's not one that I didn't use all too much. I used it a handful of times, but for my build and for Ultimaniac and everything else that I was doing, I just didn't use it all too much. I'm not quite sure if I want to leave this as a. We'll probably leave that. We'll probably leave that there. I think that's probably solid enough. It's not too bad. Not too bad. And then we saved the last. Sorry, last but not least, we've saved the best for last. The Skills of Titan, the game's ultimate Omega simp. And let's be honest, we've all seen Benedicta, and who can blame him? Who can blame him? Who Who can blame Hugo? Getting sidetracked though. Let's break down his skills. Okay, so Titanic Block is, I mean, if you like parrying, it's a no-brainer, right? As the name implies, you press the button, you guard against attacks. If you try and guard some incredulously powerful attacks, just straight up, your guard can get broken, so you have to be careful. But it makes up for it in the fact that you can parry a lot of attacks, evade damage altogether, and also reprise with some Titanic counters. Now, I believe if you try and use the Titanic counters, you're not impervious to damage, so you will take damage, so you've got to be careful. But, I mean, it's an S tier. It's an S tier skill. If your timing is on point, which way am I pointing? I'm pointing this way. Up, which way? This way. There we go. It's an S tier. If your skills are good enough, if the player's skill, if there's no skill issues, if you are good enough, you can parry your way through the game. And for that reason alone, the beauty of this skill alone, it just deserves to be in an S tier, Alternatively, we have Earthen Fury, the Titan's ultimate skill. And this skill, okay, so to explain, Clive slaps his hand into the ground, literally fists the ground, literally fucks the world. And then just, he's like, I'm tired of this shit, flips the table after getting beat at Triple Triad, and, just throws the earth everywhere, like a shockwave. Does a considerable amount of physical damage, not too much stagger damage. My main issue with this is that if an enemy moves, they will evade the attack. Because he throws out a shockwave, if the enemy moves by the time that they get to it, there's no point. Alternatively, if the enemy is not huge and doesn't have multiple hitboxes, they're not hit multiple times by this attack, and so it's kind of a waste. It works fantastically against crowds of enemies, but against singular enemies, it's not the best. It's kind of like, which move did I say I said the opposite for? I can't quite remember. But it's an okay ability. Probably compared to all of the other abilities, the ultimate abilities, it's probably going to be a solid B tier, let's be honest. It's no blind justice, but it is what it is. Then we have Raging Fists. Raging Fists works quite similar to Rook's Gambit in that the initial animation in which I believe Clive steps forward, if you time it so that an enemy attacks just as Clive steps forward, he'll parry and then he'll throw out his own sort of flurry of blows, and I think they do more damage, again incentivizing you to use it. Also, there's less of a recovery time if you time it as well. It's a cool move, incentivizes you to engage with the game's mechanics. Does an okay amount of damage. I think it's more so stagger that people tend to use it. But for things like Ultimaniac mode, because I'm not quite sure that you're impervious to damage when you're using Raging Fists. So enemies can quite literally just tank through it and just, considering they've got a lot of hyper armor, they'll just slap the life out of you during this move. For that reason alone, I think Raging Fists, it's probably, we'll probably leave it at a B tier. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're going for timing stuff, particularly in Ultimaniac, where if you mistime something, you'll end up pretty much almost dying, there are a lot of other moves that are worth risking it for, so to speak. I'd find something like Cold Snap a lot more useful in terms of risk versus reward in that whole gambit, compared to Raging Fists. One freezes the enemy and lets you do whatever the hell you want, and the other one just kind of parries the enemy and then puts you into an animation where I don't think you're invulnerable. Then we have Wind Up. Wind Up, I mean, you wind up a big haymaker and then Clive just throws it out. Requires timing when you charge it. Does a really, really good amount of damage, even well into late game, New Game Plus. So I think for that reason alone, it's got itself into an A tier. And then last but not least, we have Upheaval, which I'm trying to think about where I would go. I mean, to explain it, I believe it's another timed move where you're able to, you upheave the land. If you use it in midair, I don't think you can charge it. Clive just plummets straight to the ground and throws out this air of effect shockwave. But it's not one that I really used all too much. I didn't find much use for it. There's a much better variety of skills out there that you can use. You know? And so it's kind of, yeah, it's teetering. It's teetering on that tier. Now, initially I did want to kind of have these like go from best to worst, from left to right, but quite honestly, I think we're just going to have them all as in their own solid band. So everything in S tier is all kind of equal, everything in A tier is all equal, everything in B tier is all equal, everything in C tier is all equal, you know. Otherwise I'd literally be here all day trying to draw. You know, anybody seen that episode of It's Always Sunny with Charlie just, you know, looking like he's not slept in 12 days, you know. But yeah, that is my Final Fantasy XVI tier list when it comes to iconic abilities and iconic feats. Let me know what you think. Whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, whether I'm a fake Final Fantasy fan or not, or whatever argument you want to put forth. Let me know. Just let me know. It has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.